Sorry. We need the stars over here. Good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here. My name is Cher Musico, and I'm the operations manager here in TWU Visual Arts. We're so excited about this exhibition here. It was conceived before the pandemic by one of our professors, Meg Griffith, and their business partner, Francis Jakubek. Sorry about that. And so they had released it during the pandemic, so we're really excited that before it starts touring that we were able to bring it here at TWU, especially with the book launch. And so I will hand this over to Meg and Francis and let them introduce you to our panel, and I hope you guys have been enjoying the evening. Thank you. Thanks, Cher.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Cher, for that wonderful introduction. So the photographs that you see around you represent a myriad of voices, genres, themes, materials, choices fueled by 106 different women across the United States, all making work about the 19th Amendment. Each woman was given the call to make work in response, reflection, or reaction to the ratification of that amendment back in 2019. And since the launch of this work in 2020, through a dedicated website and an Instagram, images have toured around the country in various versions and iterations, and now it's been published in a book by Texas A&M Press with the support of Texas Women's University. We're incredibly pleased to bring it here, obviously because it's Texas Women's, empower women through education. And it's in perfect alignment with our mission. So truly, truly honored and proud to have y'all here. So I want to introduce everybody. Obviously, this is my partner, Francis Jakubek, amazing partner in crime for the last 6 years. And to her left, we have Janine Bales, Dallas artist, who's published so many books. And Lily Brooks, next to her, assistant professor at Southeastern Louisiana University. Susan K. Grant, professor emerita, right here at TWU, had my position for 35 years and championed women, so many generations I cannot tell you. And Letitia Huckaby, so happy to have you here. Associate professor, that's right, assistant, well, just a matter of time. At University of North Texas. All right, so the 19th Amendment's legacy is complicated, for it did not ensure suffrage to all women. Even after 1965, the Voting Rights Act, challenges to voting rights continued. The same barriers have been weakened by Supreme Court decisions, as well as most recently with the passing of H.R. Bill 22. In case you didn't know that, you should definitely look it up. It's very, very recent, making it harder for women to vote. The fight to ensure all women can vote has been a long, multifaceted struggle and still continues. So the question, that was quite a bit of a lead up. What was the most surprising or challenging thing about digging into this history or your particular project for a Yellow Rose project? What was the most challenging thing?
Do you want to just go down the line?
Yes, it's open to everybody, so just jump in whenever you want. Yeah.
Well, when I was working on, when you guys approached me for this project, I was already working on a project on the suffrage movement. And so 4 pieces from that are in this exhibition. But as I was going through and putting together some Instagram posts leading up to the 2020 election, I was going through and doing research on civil rights and women's rights, starting from the Iroquois Confederacy or the Haudenosaunee, all the way up to the 2020 election. And there were so many things that I did not know. I didn't know that the National Institutes of Health were not doing any research on women until 1992. And now all of that is erased with this new administration. I think, too, I remember learning about the Pregnancy Act of 1978. My mom was fired from her job in 1965 when she got pregnant with my sister. I remember talking to my mom about that and about how women could not get credit cards. They couldn't do, the Small Business Association, they couldn't get a loan without a male cosigner, and I think that was 88. So I just was shocked by all of these things that I think I should have known. And I think that is in relation to this whole, right to vote, and everything is tied together.
Yeah, now it's on. Can you hear me? Thank you so much. I think that one of the things that you're pointing out as you say that is that our understanding of politics in this country and of the civil rights struggle and the suffrage movement have been totally sanitized for our consumption. And so I think now we are learning a lot of those kinds of details, and the complexity and the slowness with which progress has been made has become really evident. For me, with this project, I focused on a particular woman from history who was a Creole woman who lived in Louisiana in the 19th century. And she was a free woman of color, and she co-founded the first order of nuns that was all made up of women of color. And in the antebellum South, of course, it was illegal to educate people of color to read, but they were doing that subversively and also fighting a number of other systems of oppression. But I also found out that in her own history, the caste system that was very much in place, and colorism, which was very much in place in Louisiana and elsewhere, of course, was true in her own life. She enslaved someone. She had a servant living in her household who was an enslaved person. So I'm very interested in her courage on one hand and also her complicity on the other.
The two really interesting things that I learned were, I didn't know that a woman ran for president in, what was the date, does anybody know, 18-something? 1880. I mean, I had no idea, which really kind of blew my mind. And then I also didn't know, as I did know, that women weren't allowed to wear pants, but when the bloomer was invented, women could ride bicycles, which helped them congregate in secret places in order to have meetings to plan, their demonstrations. And so those are the two things that I loved learning. And when I agreed to do this project, I was really fascinated. I wanted to know who these suffragists were and why I didn't know who they were. Some famous ones I knew, but I wanted to sort of uncover some that I had never heard of, like Helen Keller was really strong in the movement. I didn't know that. And I'm not doing that. And I had already been doing a series of shadow portraits, and I wanted to use the shadow as a portrait to signify all women and all the women that worked behind the scenes that we will never ever know worked behind the scenes to make us be able to vote today. And so I scoured as many archives as I could find to find silhouettes of profile pictures, documentary photographs of women suffragists, and then I took those into Photoshop and painted them as masks and then created backdrops in my studio. So I wanted to make them sort of come alive as if it was their aura or the likeness of them, which was, there's no specificity to their faces or their gender or their ethnicity, which to me was really signifying all the women that worked behind the scenes. So that was my project.
I think what was surprising for me as an African American growing up in a house where my mom marched with Martin Luther King was everything, because the focus growing up was on the fight because of the color of my skin and not my gender was not a major source of conversation at home because it seemed like there was a bigger thing to deal with. So everything was new to me, and I was really shocked at like the dates and when things happened and how it shifted, because I had no clue about how long it took for women to get certain rights. So it was an education for me. But the project that I did is called Suffer Rage, and the piece that's in the exhibition is a print of my daughter on a, if my mic went out, did it? Okay. On a vintage like cotton picking sack, the sack that they would drag through the fields to put the cotton in when they were harvesting it. And then for the rest of the project, I invited other women artists. I sent them a protest sign in the mail, and I told them to just do whatever they wanted with the sign and send it back to me. And then I would photograph them and print them onto vintage fabrics as well. So the project ended up being very similar to this exhibition, kind of a survey of women's voices that had to do with suffrage.
Thank you all. Coincidentally, each of you have chosen to approach this prompt by making work about women through portraiture or representation of historical figures. A couple of you touched on this a little bit, but can each of you speak a bit about how you came to this choice, as so many chose different avenues and directions, and then discuss maybe a specific piece of your work from the initial concept to the final creation?
Is this better? Okay. So my project is entitled Standing Together, Inez Milholland's Final Campaign for Women's Suffrage. And so I found Inez Milholland through the abolitionist movement. And then Seneca Falls, and I had done a previous body of work entitled Through Darkness to Light, Photographs Along the Underground Railroad. And as I was working on the suffrage movement and researching, I was trying to find an avenue into it because, as we know, it was 100 years and lots of women participated. And so finally, a light bulb went off, and it was like, why don't you just follow one person? And so I was trying to figure out who to follow, and I saw a banner that Inez Milholland had carried in a New York parade, and I believe it was in 1915, and it said, "Forward out of darkness, forward into light." And so I figured, well, I need to research this because the universe is trying to tell me something. And so I tracked down Inez's, I guess, the words and letters. They're in the Harvard Schlesinger Library. And she wrote a bunch of speeches on suffrage, and she was the main campaign woman who was giving all of these speeches when the National Women's Party sent, I guess, this group of women to do a protest, asked the women in the West to do a protest vote against Wilson, who was up for re-election in 1916. And reading her words over 100 years later, they're still absolutely relevant today, and it was disturbing. The ERA that still hasn't passed, Equal Rights Amendment, it's the original verbiage from 1920, and it has not changed. So I guess I fell in love with Inez, and so the suffragists wore white dresses. And so what I would do is I followed her along the campaign trail, but I asked different women to step in for her, and I asked them to wear a white dress. And I tried to pick women of different ages, different races, because ultimately the suffragists did, in the end, obviously 1965 and Voting Rights Act, did give us all access to the ballot.
Thank you. So when I was starting this project, I had just learned of Henriette DeLisle. I had been in contact with a historian through another project that I was doing that has also to do with power and vulnerability in Louisiana specifically. And I couldn't find an image. I wanted to think about her and focus on one individual, and I couldn't find many images of her. There's really only one that exists that I could find, and it was made by someone whose last name is Constant, and I don't know exactly when. So I knew I wanted to work with this image and think about her, and I also knew that I wanted to get off the screen because it was early COVID days. I was also without my usual equipment because I was taking care of a family member who was really ill, and I was away from my studio. So thinking about this 19th century character, I thought I would use a 19th century material, so I made these images, very rudimentary cyanotypes, of the original image, but I decided to break that image up and think about the parts of her that had power. So I'm focusing on her hands and her eyes and her mouth. There were lots of failed attempts. My sort of failures were a lot of technical problems as I was figuring that out in a strange space. But it was fun. I learned a lot.
Well, I'll go a little deeper into the project. So it was lockdown, it was COVID. I love books and I love libraries and I love archives, but I couldn't go to any of those. So I spent a lot of time online searching in different, suffragists, women's groups. And believe it or not, a lot of the information, a lot of the portraits I found were in the Parks Department. I'm not sure why, but the Department of Parks all across the country have all these photographic archives and women in them. So I started gathering all of those portraits, and then one of the things people always ask me a lot about those portraits is the way that they look, like how clear or how evident is the original documentary photograph, the profile picture. And I like to admit that I took a lot of artistic liberty in their clothing, in their, like a neckline, because if you just take a profile image photographically and make it all black, it doesn't have as much personality. So I tried to read as much as I could about each subject, and then I would paint their portrait and take it into Photoshop and then create an original backdrop behind it. But I'm kind of messing around a lot with the facts, I guess I would say. And some of the women, it wasn't a true profile. They might be turned slightly sideways, so I had to invent or guess what their profile might actually look like. And then those became inkjet, big, large-scale inkjet prints. I have a couple other stories of things that happened through the project. I think I'll wait. Do you want it now, or should we wait until your next question? So, two things happened. One is, and this takes me back to my memory as a child, is that in my household and the women in my community were always referred to by their husbands' names, not their first name, if there was anything printed about them, or in my family it was always Mrs. Robert Grant. And the portrait of the woman in the book is Mrs. Robert Morton. And I did a ton of research. Like, I emailed so many people to try to find out what her first name was. And I ended up talking with a woman who's the president of the women's group that she was in the 1800s. And she went to her gravestone and took a picture of it. And that's how I found her first name, right? Which is pretty amazing, I think.
And
then,
the correct spelling.
pretty astounding, right? I mean, there's no history in any books, anything written with her first name anywhere, which I was appalled by, and really so excited by this woman that helped me. I'm going to send her a book, so that women's group is excited. And then the second thing was, Vogue magazine did a really short little article about one of my portraits, with an article about Deb Willis's suffragist work, and one of the portraits in my project, the granddaughter of that woman saw that Vogue article and contacted me. And she lives in New York, and she's a pretty well-known woman in the community, in the activist community. But in order to meet her and have her grandmother's portrait, I sent her a copy of that portrait. It was just such an amazing privilege and aha moment, that what are the chances of that happening, so that was cool.
I think mine works, but I was so enjoying your answer, I've forgotten what the question was. What am I talking about?
Do you have a specific piece or one of the collaborations of the people that you worked with that you could talk about?
Okay. I'm back.
Yeah, okay.
So the piece that's up in the show of my daughter on the cotton picking sack was really sort of my conversation about where Black women fit into the suffrage movement and where they were left out, and the fight to be seen, maybe. And so the image of her is reminiscent of little girls fighting to go to school, on the walk to school. And also the pose is referencing the Morton Salt Girl, where you never saw, like, even with all the changes that happened with the image of the Morton Salt Girl, you never saw a person of color in that space. And so the piece is called Sugar and Spice. And it also made me think about, some of y'all might be old enough to remember the poem about little girls and little boys and what they're made of. And so it was a kind of tongue-in-cheek reference to that as well. But the fact that it's like printed on this cotton picking sack, and she looks so innocent, that there's this juxtaposition, I think, that tugs at you, when you see the piece. And I wish we could have had the piece, because it's like the sack is, I think, 9 feet in length. So it has a kind of weight to it when you see the little girl printed on it.
Do you want to tell everybody where that piece went? It's in the Smithsonian, yes?
Yeah. I'm not exactly happy about the Smithsonian right now. Okay. Thank you. Smithsonian's being overrun right now, but so we don't know what's going to happen with
that's
all of
true.
that stuff, but
There's another interesting thing about your piece, though, the word enough. And was that drawn from Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter's talk?
Yeah, for her talk, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's something about the youth voice being included in that piece, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was like, enough is enough. My grandfather had a dream that all people could have So great. Okay. I don't know about that, that microphone. Lisa Volpe, curator of photography at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, writes in the introduction to our book that the images in this exhibition use the weapons of art wielded by women to reflect on and fight for and promote freedoms. What do you think about that statement in reference to this body of work that we've collectively made? And in what ways do you think that art, and specifically photography, can be used as an effective tool and a vehicle by which to enact change? I'll go again. Her statement? Yeah, I mean, it's a powerful one. She says, the images in this exhibition use the weapons of art wielded by women to reflect on and fight for and promote freedoms.
It's sad that it has to be described as a weapon because it's really our voice. Why is it a weapon? You know, like that in itself to me is a little gut-wrenching that it has to be described that way, but I get it. I get why she said that. You know, interesting thing, when I was doing my project, I was on vacation overseas and would wake up to these bird songs and just got obsessed with bird songs and started recording them and don't know anything about birds. So then I came back to the States and tried to research these birds, and I found that all of the recordings of bird songs are male birds. And so there's this big push now to get out and record the female bird songs. So when I've showed this body of work as a whole, I have the birds singing in the space because it's our voice. It's our, you know, this, probably for every woman up here, her work speaks louder than she does when she's talking to you, because that's our natural way of communicating. So yes, but I guess in this context, it's a weapon because it's been so controlled throughout history that it's still not seen as maybe natural, you know, and valid.
I'll add something. The work I did for this project I wouldn't call dark, but the work prior to it, from early black and white work to color work to black and white again, has always addressed issues of gender inequality and dark places in the world. And I've always used art as a tool for self-expression to talk about things I wasn't willing to verbally discuss or I felt inadequate to address or discuss. And I never thought of it like a weapon. I always thought of art for me was a way to express myself with imagery and setups in a way that I couldn't do with words. And for me, it was about making fabricated images that ask people difficult questions and set up mysteries and curiosities that I would say ask more questions than give answers. But I've always, been accused of it being dark and sometimes grotesque and problematic. And maybe I wouldn't think of it as a weapon, but maybe for some people it looks like a weapon. Forcing people to think and contemplate and address difficult issues isn't always appreciated in our world, especially right now.
Yeah, I always find that to be a really troubling critique when somebody says, oh, it's so dark. I don't know, this work is so dark. I'm like, who are you to tell me it's too dark? Or who are you to tell her it's too dark, right? Drives me crazy. But, I think the word weapon is interesting. Think about our cameras. A Canon is a Canon, right? The medium itself, yeah, shooting, etc. The medium itself is totally intertwined with exploitation of all different kinds and colonialism and extraction. It can be a really extractive medium when it's not used carefully. And I think one of the powerful things about this project is that this medium that has often been used as a way of silencing or controlling our ideas about how women should be and what they should do is being upended. So, thank you.
I think part of the importance of this project, and specifically a lot of the work that I pursue, is that we are, I guess, proposing work, like we mentioned, that can be uncomfortable to look at. And that's the intent. And it is meant to spark dialogue and have conversations. And I think so often lately, and especially since the pandemic, so many people hide behind their computers and their keyboards, and they don't have conversations face to face. And they can say things that they would type things that they would never say verbally to someone's face. And so I think the importance of exhibitions like this is bringing groups of diverse people together and discussing uncomfortable topics is utterly important now.
Thank you. Danielle Abram, UT Dallas Gallery Director and Arts and Culture writer, wrote this amazing article for our book. And in it she states, "Photography is inherently a democratic yet malleable process, haunted by its perceived history as a truth teller, when it has always been a combination of science, magic, documentation, and fabrication, the decisive moment and a series of moments gathered into one. In a time when images are more abundant than ever and trust in them is increasingly fragile, what responsibility do you feel we carry as image makers in how images are shared, seen, and understood?"
So my entry into photography was through documentary work. And I know my work doesn't really look like that right now, but I still feel at my heart that I'm a documentary photographer. So truth is very important to me. So with this project, you know, just allowing the women to present themselves in the way they wanted to be represented, to create the protest signs that was their legitimate voice, is my connection to my documentary roots in this project. And it's true with all the work that I do. I still sort of carry my camera in the same way. Like I like a rangefinder camera, and I like to have close contact and interaction with my subjects. So truth is very, very important to me in the work. Yeah. And I think that that's my way of just being honest with the viewer, that I know I'm coming from this place where I'm representing each person in their own light, and that's what they're giving to whoever comes to see the work.
I love following you because my photographs have never told the truth about anything. And when I got my first camera, like in, I don't know, junior high, a little World's Fair camera, I posed all my girlfriends in the neighborhood in these little bizarre scenarios. And so for me, using a camera was always about fabricating something that wasn't real, in a way to pose people, bring props, go to a location, and make up a story or a narrative that made you think, none of it is real, none of it tells any truth. But yet, if I look back at my journals from early on, college days, and even, recent, there is a message there that I think I'm telling some kind of a truth, but it's just one point of view that's different than the world that you couldn't find anywhere else in the world because it's all fabricated.
I think my relationship to truth is a little fuzzy in photography. I'm often thinking about things that are very real and have a real effect on how people live in the world, but I am approaching it through, like, with a lot of awareness about my own subjectivity. And I try to make space in the work I'm making to react intuitively, even if I'm then going back and analyzing it very critically, and kind of going back and forth between being in a place and reacting, and then letting that intuition lead me to some kind of like research or critical analysis. But I think as far as like our responsibility as artists to truth goes, I really encourage my students to contextualize their work and surround it with statements and research that supports their ideas and also helps them think about their place as a maker, their positionality within the work. And I think for me, as a cisgendered white woman who has a full-time job and a master's degree, I have to really think about my own privilege all the time as I'm making, and I encourage others to do that too, especially in my classroom, where it's my job to encourage them. Thanks.
So my work is all, at least for the last decade, has been all historically based. And so every time I'm going to research a topic, I'm learning new things. For instance, with the suffrage movement, I think the whole of that I learned in high school was that there were XYZ amendments, 1 through whatever, and the 19th was one of them. And there was no description of the struggles. And so I'm trying to highlight the history and have all of the things that have been brushed under the rug. I want to bring them out into the light and to discuss them. And so I guess that's in a way like trying to expose the truth from the past, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. Okay. Each of you have chosen to make work using various creative processes and material choices. For instance, Lily, your work uses 19th century process called cyanotype. Letitia, you transferred images onto cotton picking sacks, which I don't know if many people even know how to do that. Susan, your shadow portraits have so many steps, and you've described some of those here today in terms of manipulation. And Janine, your images feel as though, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, they feel like they're intentionally distressed or aged and in post, probably. So can you talk a bit more about these decisions and why you chose them, why you made them, each of you? Thank you.
So when I was doing the project Standing Together with Inez Milholland, she was traveling in 1916. And so that project is composed of 3 different types of images. When she was traveling, she was writing back to her husband and discussing the landscapes in great detail and how she wanted to go back and see the landscapes with him. And a little sad side note, she was very sick while she was on that campaign, and she gave her last speech in LA, and then she was hospitalized a few days later and passed away a month after that. So she was one of the sole martyrs of the suffrage movement and lost way too young at 30. But so the landscape images are kind of recreated from what she described to her husband through her eyes. And then like I mentioned, I restaged some of the images from the campaign trail through portraits and different people. And at the time, the color process was autochromes. And so what I did is that all of this stuff was shot digitally, but I found a post-processing program that would make the images look like autochromes. And so I ran the digital image through that, and there were like 4 different settings. There was like a yellow, a blue, and maybe an orange autochrome, but nothing was really mimicking what a true autochrome looked like. So I ended up like piecing it all together and doing, some of them have like 25 different layers in there to get what I did. And then typically autochromes were printed on glass. So what I did is, and the glass would get scratched, and so that's why the images are meant to look that way. And then when I have presented some of them in the past, in order for you to see an autochrome easily, it had to be backlit. And so then I built these light boxes and put the image in the light box, and then it was lit from behind, and then you could see the images through that.
Sure. I already spoke quite a bit about my process, and I guess I'll just say that the cyanotype is something I had never done before. I did this. Like I had done like a test, but I don't teach. Up to that point, I wasn't teaching it. I had never taken an alternative process class. So I think in that moment, because of the condition of not having access to my studio, but also just like really wanting to make something physical because so much of my life was happening over these horrible Zoom meetings, that process appealed to me in a way that it had never had before. And I always think that making a photograph material, even if it begins in a digital space, is a really powerful transformation. So thinking about scale and the shooting format, all of that carries a lot of conceptual weight for me personally.
So I'll go even a little deeper into my process. So I took those portraits into Photoshop, which I mentioned, but then I took them into a program called Capture One. And for those photo people, you might know of Capture One, but Capture One allows you to layer some images with a real set. So my camera is in the studio, and my shadows are all cast against a 10 or 12-foot backdrop. And Capture One allows me to put that shadow portrait that I've painted in the foreground, so then I can create a realistic set on the studio to mimic, or what I think might relate to the artist, the portrait that I'm making. And an example I will give you is the woman whose name I have to look, Adele Hunt Logan, who I mentioned I met the granddaughter of. Her life came to a sudden end because she jumped out a window. She never saw women get the vote, but she was very active in the suffragist movement. So if you look at that portrait of her, I'm sorry it's not, you can see it on my website and in my Instagram post. I've created, Richard, was that a radiator hose or something? Like my images are all, those shadows are all smoke and mirrors. So I had some kind of a little radiator, I don't know, I think it was a
heating element from a hot water heater.
Yeah, so it was the heating element from a hot water heater that I projected light through, and it looks just like, you know, an old Gothic kind of window, which in the books and research I read about her, she jumped out of a school window. So each of those portraits, I'm collecting all these weird odds and ends and pieces of plastic, anything that will make a cool shadow. So I'm working really intuitively. I already have the portrait on my computer screen, and then I just start creating the images around it in order to make something that I think looks realistic. The other one that I'll mention, the portrait in the book, Mrs. Robert Morton, her profile was this really elegant, beautiful photo on a white background. And so I just felt like she needed to be on something really beautiful and feminine looking, and kind of maybe a piece of lace. And so that's a beautiful piece of lace that I had, that I put some other shadows with it in order to make her background.
Was she related to the Morton salt by chance?
That's why we're sitting next to each other. A
don't
light
know the
bulb
answer
just
to
went
that.
off listening to you, because I've often wondered how you did all that. And in my mind, it was way more like you in the studio doing a lot of this.
Well, it is a lot of a lot of things falling, wires hanging,
Yeah.
cussing, swearing, crying.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And I wasn't too far off with that part. Mine's not as glamorous, but I do like printing on fabric, and I like fabric that has a history in it. So not all of the women were printed on cotton picking sacks. There were some flour sacks and some sugar sacks and what my mom calls croaker sacks and like burlap sacks. And so the printing happened in different ways. Like I've broken a lot of digital printers because I'll take sacks apart and trick the printer into thinking it's paper and run it through there. Or Cooper Lux has saved me a lot in Dallas. If you know Cooper Lux, they have this beautiful like flatbed printer that sucks things down with a vacuum. So if you have like a cotton picking sack that you want to print on, they can suck that thing down, and then the head just kind of goes right across the top. It's like a quarter inch above it, and shoots the die into a piece. So you don't have to take that piece apart. Or I screen print, so sometimes I screen print.
It's amazing. I have learned so much about each of your processes. We're just going to ask one more question. We had two, but for the sake of time. So I don't know if you knew this, but this spring marks the 125th anniversary for our school, which is really exciting. We have so many things planned. You should come back. As an institution, the largest state-funded institution predominantly for women, it's kind of a thing to be very proud of. This past August marked 105 years since the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So in reflection upon time and the distance between then and now, and anniversaries even to come, how far do you feel we have come in 105 years? And is there something you are excited about or energized about, even given some of the things that are going on?
I'll start.
Yes.
When you sent us that question, I felt terrible. Like I felt like we were just backsliding. And then I thought, don't be negative. Let's just focus on like, where have we come? And I remembered my older sister went to college at the University of Kentucky, Louisville. And after dark, she had to be escorted to the library by a male. My mother's generation had no credit. You couldn't have a checking account. If I look at all these different things, like we can vote, we can get an education. Women weren't even allowed an education and still aren't in parts of the country. We have come a long way, and I think in these last year or so, I feel like there's such a movement in pushing us back to the 1950s, which is really upsetting. And I go back and forth from being really mad about it by trying to be active and focus on the positive things, because there are a lot of really positive things that women can do that they never ever could do before.
I think that's a good response. Like, I try not to look at the bigger picture. That sounds awful, I know. But if I can just kind of hone in on the little things and the small. One of my children is 17. She's a girl. And she was having a hard time deciding what she wants to be when she grows up. And when you're a teenager, everywhere you go, all the adults ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was causing her a lot of stress. And so I took her on a sojourn with me to North Carolina, and there was this communing of women from all over the country that did, multiple different things. And so she was able to sit and talk with these women and ask them, do you end up doing what you went to college for? Right? Like most of us end up shifting at some point, or how did you get to where you want to be? And she left that sojourn a whole different person, like having that interaction. And so those kind of things, these little successes with young women and being able to be an example to her and the younger one of what women can do is where I have to keep my focus. Because if I start thinking about everything that's going on in the off-White House, then I'll be depressed and y'all have to put me in somebody's home.
Yeah, sorry, I have not totally processed this question yet, but I guess I am having a hard time keeping my chin up, if I'm being honest. However, I see that the students that I teach, which are college-age students, are so kind to each other, and they are so concerned about each other's well-being, and so despite us thinking that they all want to be online all the time, right, and everyone's isolated, when I see them interacting with each other, they seem really desperate for connection and really like they know that they want it, which I think is better than maybe other generations who were just stuffing down that desire to know each other and really be in contact with each other. And I think that relational style of community really works in organizing and community organizing. You know, when we know each other individually or as members of an institution, then those individuals are more likely to act on behalf of each other's interests. So I think thinking about how things change both at like a personal, small level, like you're referencing, but also understanding that we are being affected by a system that's out of our control allows me to sort of forgive, you know, individuals and understand that they're also part of the system. So I don't know. I think there's hope, and I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think I try to avoid the news as much as possible, but sometimes you get knocked over the head with it, like the SAVE Act and you know, women's, I guess the passports, and I mean, I didn't have a passport until I was 28. So it's like, well, would I have not voted before that? Possibly. And when I got married and had to track down my birth certificate, and some people don't have access to birth certificates. So my mind can go down these ever-increasing rabbit holes that are not good. So I try to, you know, use my art to focus on, I guess that's my way of using my voice and trying to, I guess, change people's opinions, if I can at all do that. I don't know, but I try. So.
I just wanted to turn it back just for a minute to all of you. I want you to imagine we couldn't even meet like this as women. Imagine that you couldn't wear pants. Imagine you couldn't have a driver's license. Imagine you had to take your husband's name, or you were outcast because you didn't have a husband. Imagine you couldn't have a checking account. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. And I just, like, that was a really important question that you asked. Like when we complain and think we haven't gone anywhere, we really have made huge breakthroughs in what women can and do, you know.
Well, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you guys. Those are amazing answers, and y'all are amazing people. And thank you all so much for showing up and being a part of our community and seeing the show. And hopefully you'll all pay it forward. And yeah, thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you all. Thank you to Meg and Francis for this exhibition, for the book. Thank you to our special guest. Just so you know, there's 105 pieces that they hung, so that's a lot of pieces. They did a fantastic job. And thank you also to our special guests, Janine, Lily, Susan, and Letitia. Thank you for sharing your work and for sharing your perspectives. So yes, thank you all for being here. We invite y'all to stick around. We still have about an hour left that the reception will be going on. Alumni and special guests, you are welcome to join us in room 110 for a little snackies, and then of course there's snackies in the lobby there. So thank you all for being here.
Can I add one thing? Sure. I think everybody who's on this panel, their work is actually on display in the other room, so make sure you get to go see it. Thanks.
Hey y'all, if any of the artists for a Yellow Rose Project are still here, we would love to get a group photo. Also, any TWU alumni, we would love to get a group photo. And former PAC members, we would love to get a PAC photo. So if we could get y'all to come on down over here, thank you so much.
I was a PAC member.
Yeah, me too.